just this week, I'm supposed to be working on some of these other projects. I have a 12-issue Batman series that I've been working on for years and years in my head. Someday, hopefully, I'll get to tell it. Who knows? And I just had the big twist hit me this week, and I'm like writing it, and I came up, and I was excitedly telling my wife all about it. She's like, "What is this for? Which job is this for?" I'm like, "Oh, I don't have this job." Like, but this is something I'm really excited about right now.
Hey, thanks for listening. We're going to get into the recording right away. This week's guest is Matthew K. Manning. Matt is another local here in Asheville, so we can tie him on when it comes to conversations. This was recorded only a couple of days after Heroes Con in Charlotte, so you'll hear my voice is pretty beaten up, and Matt sounds way better than I do, so he wins. Matt also went to the same school as I did, so we are probably a decade apart in age, so we don't have any overlap, but we know many of the same people. He is a great teller of stories on top of being a great writer. It's always a joy to talk with him about the comic business and the craft of writing. Yeah, with no further ado, this is me and Matt Manning. Hey, long time no see, buddy.
Yeah, it's been, 2 days?
I don't know if I could have done this yesterday. My voice was so Peter Brady. It was unbelievable.
Oh, man.
It was just cracking everywhere.
Yeah, I lose mine every New York Comic Con. Like, there's no exception. Yeah. I'm just like, especially after like the Saturday night Marvel party that's so loud, I'm just like shouting my stories over everybody, and that's awful. Like, I did a panel Sunday morning. It was a kids panel one year, and my voice was so awful. It sounded like I've been like a career smoker, and I'm like, "Hey kids, read the Marvel Avengers. They're wonderful."
You were in charge of the bullpen in 1964 is what you were at that point.
Yeah, it seemed like it. Oh, man.
It's funny you were saying that. I was talking with someone about, so we're talking about Heroes Con, and I was talking to someone about because they've taken over the whole floor.
Yeah.
Even though it's like record numbers of attendees, the body count doesn't seem that high because everybody's displaced over this large facility.
Oh yeah, was it record numbers?
Yeah.
Oh man, yeah, it does not seem like that.
No, that's the thing, and I think it's because they've taken over that additional third. So now you just have this whole sort of space. So the aisles aren't crowded. Like you could just the only aisles that are crowded are like the ones that are the transitional aisles between like the artist alley main area and then section C. And like they have a lot of retailers in there. It gets a little tight, but it doesn't, like in New York, you're fighting all these people the whole time. Like you can't go.
Yeah,
it is just
like 45 minutes to get across from one end to the other.
Yeah, I remember when texting, became de rigueur, and you would be at the show and someone's like, "Oh, hey, so and so's here at my table. Come on by," and you're like on the elsewhere, and you're like, "I'll be there in a half hour."
Yeah, I remember like not giving enough time for panels and stuff, and I'm like, oh my god. Or like when DK would send me out there, and I didn't give myself enough time to get to the booth, the only signing I have to do while I'm there. And it's like, oh my god, I gotta hurry. I'm like pushing past cosplayers. They're holding up the whole aisle. The worst thing is when you have a popular cosplayer or something that people are getting a lot of pictures of, and they'll like stop right in front of your table at a show, and then you're like, all right, I'm not gonna talk to anybody for the next like 40 minutes while everybody's shooting these pictures and stuff.
But it is interesting because I think that lack of urgency without the people around makes for a different sense of the show for Heroes than even in previous years. I think I think the attendees don't have the sense of, oh, I got to get over here, I got to get over there, because there's this inherent crowd. in this case, it's not. It's just a big open kind of space you can kind of roller skate around in.
Yeah, I think what I was noticing that everybody was doing, all the VIP people were going and get their Claremont and Ramita signatures because that was really the
Mm,
lines. Like I don't think there was. I mean, I'm trying. Oh, Adam Kubert had a line as well, but all
yeah,
the ones that my daughter wanted signatures from were all the ones that were like insane waits. Like Claremont was like 3 hours, and but
I couldn't imagine.
yeah. Well, luckily, I had a friend that waited in several of those lines already, and he was like, "Oh, I'll get your daughter's book signed and stuff." So that
Well,
was a
that's
big
really
help.
nice.
Yeah, I just gave him the money for the signatures, and yeah,
Right. And it's so interesting for both of us having grown up from fans to the professional side of things, but like years into this, and how that like the idea of like someone like if somebody's like, well, I'll charge you $5 for signing your comic book, like in 1995, they'd have been put on a pillory, like it would have been this super like offensive thing. But you think about it, it's like this is how they make their money.
yeah. Especially like Steve Englehart, who's not doing a book or has like just one trade paperback at DC, despite it being one of the best Batman comics ever written. It's like, oh, he's
Right.
charging $10 a signature. All right, that's that's reasonable. Although as a kid, I would have been, oh God, I can't afford any of it.
Right.
I remember the first time. Yeah, I was just saying the first time I ever saw it was John Romita Jr. actually when I was a kid, and he was doing like it was like kind of mandatory donations. I think it was for a good cause.
Hmm.
But I don't remember what it was. I just remember being like, oh man, I waited in this line. Like, I guess I've got some money in here, and like whoever the guy was next to him was like tapping the jar, and I'm like, I'm a little kid.
Oh
I'm like,
no.
hold on. It was like
Let me
panic
get up
mode.
my milk money.
Yeah. I can't have lunch.
Yeah, I mean there were a few people. I mean, I was able to walk around all weekend, and I mean, whenever Scotty Young showed up to his table, that line
Oh
was
yeah, I'm sure that was a
endless, and so I mean that kind of just hopscotches around. But I think they're pretty good at timing it to not have everybody loaded up at the same time, because then, although would that be better? Would that divide up the? No, you'd miss being able to talk to Chris Claremont.
yeah. Yeah, I think that's why I feel like it felt a little stretched just because of that. Like so many guests. Like if I was gone, I'd gone there as a fan, I would love it. But like as a person with a table, I'm like, this is a lot. Like it's a lot to get people to get over where I am, just
Hmm.
because there's so many people to see, and they're like, oh, I thought I got last year. You know,
Well, I mean, I show up there with the intention to swindle new people to come onto the podcast, and I spent all of Friday just saying hi to people I knew. So
yeah,
I'm like, I am not being very efficient in my time here.
yeah. I still missed a lot of people that I wanted to see. I don't understand that. Like I walked around a lot, so
Yeah, who did you miss?
I think Craig Rousseau was there, right? Like I didn't see him.
He was?
I think so. I saw some drawings, unless he was just doing something. And then, oh, who else? There's a couple other people. Oh, Sarah Meyer, who I know from Ninja Turtle stuff. I wanted to say hi to
Okay.
her, and I'm trying to remember who else. There was at least like 4 or 5 people. I'm like, oh, I guess I'm not gonna see you this time.
Yeah,
Well, I barely saw Sanford Green, who was around the corner. He was literally at the end of my end cap, and
he
I didn't see him
was.
till the last day, like for like 2 seconds. I was like, hey, and he has this line waiting for him, and he's like, "You're fine." I was like, "I don't want to hold you up." He's like, "You're fine." He just keeps talking to me. Such a nice guy.
He's an incredibly nice guy. Yeah, I caught John Workman as he was leaving. I
Oh,
mean,
cool.
had I shown up 2 minutes later, I wouldn't have seen him. He
Yeah.
was skedaddling out, and but he was right around the corner, like off the main line. So, and he didn't really have a setup, so I just couldn't walk around looking. Didn't even see him. He didn't have nothing that said who he was. He had to kind of figure it out. It was a game.
Yeah. I kind of to figure out mine too, but that was, positioning, I think.
Well, it's super tough because it's I wonder how you maintain a spot at a
Yeah.
show.
I used to, they were put me in a couple, I don't know if I asked too late this year or what, or they're just like,
Hmm.
we have too many people. because they would be putting me on an end cap late, which was nice. Although I was kind of like, oh, like is this enough? I was wondering if there would be more traffic. I was in an aisle, but yes, the answer is there's more traffic on the end cap,
Yeah.
at least over that side, of the convention. So
No, totally. And it's funny because nobody had the same weekend. I walked around, talking to people, and some people, Friday afternoon or evening, they're like, I don't know if it's like this tomorrow, I'm going to go home. And other people are like, I had the best day ever. And then the next day, like, nobody came by. So it's
well, the guy
strange.
next to me, he had the best day, so it couldn't just be my positioning this year because he was saying I overheard him saying like, oh yeah, it's my best. This is a show record for me, so I'm definitely coming back.
Okay.
All right,
Yeah.
but I wasn't getting my particular fans this year over where I was.
Yeah, it's a 50-50 show. You're 50% there for, economics, and then the other 50% is seeing the people that you want to see.
Yeah, I think it's more. Yeah, for me, it's going to be more about. Although next year it's all about marketing, like create your own book. But
Yeah, right.
yeah,
And I was thinking about that, like, because when you're in any profession for a long time, you do want to kind of make your mark, whatever the thing is,
yeah,
and it's kind of a lightning strike to make your mark on somebody else's property, because unless it's a layup of Batman or the X-Men, and I don't even know if that's a gimme. Like, I don't even know if it's a gimme in the sense of like everyone's going to fall in love with you
yeah.
overnight.
Yeah, I don't think so. I think it's like one of the. Although I guess it just depends. The industry so like everybody seems to make their way a different. There's not like a path.
No,
I've been noticing.
but I think the indie, I should say the creator owned work. To me, that like that's like the magic. That's the pure magic of doing the thing.
Yeah,
Because you're able to really generate this idea from whole cloth onto a page, which when it resonates with people, it has so much, I think, a deeper impact because it's a discovery for them. This is all
yeah,
brand new.
yeah. And I think the idea of you know, well, I think you can be personal through the mainstream stuff as well. You know what I mean? Like I think if you're personal, you hit somebody. But yeah, the
Hmm.
idea of like a brand new property. Oh, I can be in from the ground floor. I'm
Yeah.
excited. I know everything there is to know about this. But yeah, like I had some friends in high school that, high school friends and her husband, since they had discovered Walking Dead and had read every issue, and then he was like, I'd love to read some like superhero stuff. He's like, but if you start it, they're all like 500 issues in. Where do you start? And I'm like, you just start where, like,
Right.
when I was a kid, you just, Batman like 403. I mean, like it didn't matter. Whatever the issue, whatever issue is on the stand, that's where you start, and hopefully you can, it's exciting enough and intriguing enough to keep bringing you back.
That's so true. Like, there were so few number ones that I remember being exposed to, and I don't even think I resonated with it being a number one when I did. So I think it was until like 1981, 82 when things like was it Omega Force and like all those kinds of like these new books were coming out from like First and from DC.
Oh yeah,
They were starting out these new these new stories, and it was super exciting. Like, oh my gosh, that's when I felt that getting on board from the beginning thing, because Daredevil was already going.
yeah.
Captain America was already going. Like, none of that was new, and I wasn't catching on to that.
Yeah, I remember getting really excited about the Ray miniseries, the original. I think Joe Quesada was doing it, and Jaxie Harris was writing it. And it was just like a six
Right.
issue, brand new take on this character I'd never heard of at that point, and it was just like
Hmm.
eye catching, very modern, very what was. I was just, but I remember having to buy them at the grocery store. Like, because I hadn't discovered a comic store, or we couldn't get to the comic store often enough, is what it was. It was like 20 minutes away, where the grocery store was only 15 minutes away.
Right.
We were in the middle of nowhere in Ohio, so everything was a trek. But I remember like finding them, and they'd be all like kind of banged up because they've been read
Hmm.
through by a bunch of kids. And even back then, I was like, oh, I don't like it, but I'm gonna.
The nascent collector in you was coming out.
And it was funny because that the concept was this guy who was in his dark room, or he was kept in darkness all his whole life because he thought
Mm-hmm.
he had a rare skin disease. And then when he goes in the sun, he has the powers of the ray, and it was really a fun story. But my nephew has a skin condition where he can't be out in the sun. It's like a rare thing. He's allergic to the sun, so he has to wear like a beekeeper's suit and like full
Oh
like
wow.
gloves everywhere, even in the car. And so when I was like, oh, when I found out about that, I gave him this mini series. I was like, oh, this might be a fun one for you to read. Trying to get him into comics, and he was like, I'm going to keep them in the bag and board so they stay valuable. I was like, no, that's the opposite of what you should do for comics. I still don't know if he's ever read them.
Oh, that's so funny.
Didn't work. Yeah.
I want. I is he? What do you know if he was a collector of anything before that, or was this just something he intuited?
There's a little bit. He collected. I remember one year he was really into these when he was little. He was into like the little GI Joe sized Marvel figures because I had
Mm-hmm.
about a handful of them. I kept on my desk when I would do a Spider-Man project. I'd be fiddling with them, that sort of thing. And then every time he'd come over, he'd ask where they were and go play with them, that sort of thing. And so I bought him this set of Spider-Man and all the villains, and they were in the package. And he never opened them. But I found out it was because his dad's like, "Oh, keep them in the package; they'll be more valuable." And I'm like, "No."
Oh.
I mean, he might have opened them since, I don't know. But I was like, that is not why that is purchased. You know,
Oh
I,
yeah.
but
I'm so on the fence about the whole collecting thing.
well, I'm
I
not obviously if you see my room.
yeah. No, yeah, no. I mean, for those for everyone who doesn't see this, his office is filled with stuff, and well organized to say the least.
Oh yeah, there's this shelves of Batman.
I don't like the exclusionary aspect of it. I don't like the idea of like, well, this is just sealed off from my ever engaging with this thing
Yeah.
type of
Yeah, I've
collecting.
never. I think there's like two things I've ever kept in a package. Like everything gets opened and played with. Whether like my wife will buy me one of the fancy hot toy Japanese import. Those expensive figures every like one a year or something for Christmas or something. And all that stuff is opened and put out. Like or like even I've actually bought vintage toys and like ripped them open. I'm like, I know this is like someone probably somewhere is like, oh god. I'm like, no, I want to play. Like I bought the when I was in college, I remember buying the I found a really good deal on the Cyborg Superpowers, which was the hardest Superpowers figure to get to from this Kenner line
Okay.
of DC toys. And hardest one to get, and I finally got one. I never had it as a kid, and the first thing I did was like ruin the value and opened it up. And I'm like, I'm playing with all of them. I need this. I need to play with Cyborg. But yeah,
That's
I probably
hilarious.
shouldn't have done that one.
Well, I don't know. I mean, to me, like these things aren't made to be. They're not sculptures. They're not
Yeah.
paintings.
And
You
they're
know.
not. They're in these like slowly the things that these things are packaged in will destroy the thing you're supposed to like. Like they're not
That's a good
nothing's
point.
acid free, nothing's preserved. Like you see the bubbles, they just get yellow over years. It's like
Hmm.
I don't want to look at that. I see the appeal of the packaging, especially like 1960s stuff. That's the I see like some cool
Yeah,
like for 1960s Batman stuff. Some of the packaging is a lot of fun, but like, and I get it, like, but unless you're one of these guys who can afford to buy two of everything, to keep one to look at the card art and stuff. But it's like that's not for me. I'm always been rip it open. Like if I get a new thing, it stays on my desk and I play with it for a couple weeks, and then goes on a shelf somewhere. And then if I get I notice I get a lot of I actually use toys for work even for when I'm trying if I'm having a trickiness with a panel description, even if it's not
hmm
related to the character at all. Like get two figures and like try to see what would look coolest in the shot, that sort of thing.
I like
But
that.
yeah, but I always
It's like
like to like if I'm writing a book about Superman, I like to have a Superman figure, on my desk or something like that.
hmm
That sort of
This
thing
is all research and you can write it all off. So I
is
think
very
it's a
very
great.
important
I
in
think it's
case
very
the
important.
IRS is listening. It's very important,
Uh-huh.
essential part of the process.
We're just checking through our pre-show list, so we're making sure that all these things are covered.
Perfect.
Like travel. Let's discuss the cost of travel now. Well, so okay, you're a fan of toys. What would like for you? Like, what was the growing up? So up to the age of let's say 12 or 14. Like, what was the toy that just blew your mind?
well, like the stuff I played, I really like that Superpower series. I think that's why,
Okay.
those are really fun because they actually did stuff. You squeeze their legs and they do things. You know what I mean? And
Hmm.
they were all the scale was really impressive. Even as a little kid, I'm noticing like Flash was made to look smaller, like he was a shorter guy than Superman, and stuff like that. They didn't use the same body all the time, and they had just like fantastic like card art, and they came with the little comics, which I absolutely loved, which is probably part of the comic love for me. But I love those. Like my brother had the whole transform had a lot of Transformer stuff, so that was a good thing growing up. My brother was a year and a half older than me, so
Okay.
we could have lots of different, like like he would collect. We wouldn't collect the same thing ever, so that way we
Hmm.
got more stuff. But I
Yeah.
also like this line of toys. The Sectors I really played with a lot, and they were like this weird bug people guys.
Yeah.
I had this uncle, and he would. At that point, he was a bachelor, so every Christmas he would buy us like a whole toy line, so like 10 figures between me and my brother, and then
Wow.
we would end up one of us would liking it, and that would be the person who got it in their room or something. Like in one year it was Sectors, one year it was like Chuck Norris figures, and and then the most important year with the Atari 2600 he bought us, which was like whoa, you know.
Wow.
But yeah, so that was a really fun thing. So I actually was trying. Oni's doing a Sectors book first time since the '80s because like they tried to do this show. There was not a popular toy line. It was like they did
Yeah.
like 5 episode cartoon that never went anywhere and was just the worst cartoon. But I love it. But it's the worst. You can find it on YouTube, like terribly pixelated, and it's just like you can't get much worse as far as dialogue and the plot just is whatever they want to do. But
Mm.
but they actually are doing a new series of it. But I found out way too late and was like emailing people like, "Hey, any room on Sectors? Can I do Sectors?" Like, why is someone so excited about Sectors?
What's going on over there?
With that, and then
It,
my big thing when I was really little was the Thundercats. But
okay.
I wasn't my parents never liked to get us the big toys. Like you get one Thundercat, you can get or they had like little dollar versions of all the characters, like
Hmm.
little PVCs. So I had the entire line of PVC ones, which probably cost as much as like 3 regular Thundercats. But
Hmm.
like my parents would actually use that to bribe me to get to do things. Like it would be like because I hated sports, because I like comics, but that normally goes hand in hand. But so I was in. They made me play soccer for a couple seasons. I had to choose one sport, and I was like, I got soccer because I can run around. There's not much pressure on me when I mess up terribly. But
Hmm.
so it got to the point where like, okay, if you score a goal, you can get a Thundercat figure. We'll give you a Thundercat figure. And I'm like, oh, and then I was terrible, so I couldn't score a goal. And they're
Oh
like,
no.
or, like they put me as goalie at one point, and they're like, okay, if you stop somebody from like scoring a goal, you can have a Thundercat figure. And then by the end, it was like, you went to the game, you can have a Thundercat figure. It was just like, well, we bought all these dollar bribes. How are we're just gonna give them
Right.
to them at this point?
We can't just throw them away. That's hilarious.
You won this round, child. Yeah, when I was in kindergarten, actually, we were playing soccer and our team scored one goal the whole year, and it was on ourselves. And I don't remember this, but somehow we scored on ourselves, and all the kids were super excited. We were running around the field screaming. And none of the parents had the heart to tell us till like years later. So that's the part. That's the quality athletics I was part of.
All right. Well, now we have that. We have that locked in. So
Yeah.
I think with the for fresh memory, the Thundercat toys, the figures were bigger. They were like 10 inches or something.
I don't know if they were quite that big. They were a little bit bigger than like He-Man toys.
Okay.
And they
Yeah.
had like cool action figures. My cousin had a few of them, so I would play with his. But yeah, mine were like 2 inches.
Right. No, it's just that
That was,
it's interesting how like all the sizes went. GI Joe used to be like 10 or 12 inches tall, and then it went
yeah,
down to 8-inch Migos, and then it went down to that Kenner Star Wars size, which it kind of lingered in there with GI Joe for a long period.
yeah, and I think that's the size everybody likes of that series. You know what I mean? Like you have your fans that like want like 6-inch versions or something, but or because they're not now they're doing all these like retro like super. I think Super Seven's doing some, and some of these high end, making high end like fancy figures. But I think that 3 3/4 inch is the the sweet spot for those. But yeah, and superpowers are a weird one. They're like 5 inches. So like,
Right, but isn't that closer to the size of the actual like Batman animated series stuff? Like those are around
yeah,
that
so
size, right?
they kept that size,
Okay,
throughout, that the all through the 90s, and then they kind of, when McFarlane hit it big, with all his Spawn figures, then everybody's like, oh, we should probably do something that size. And so
gotcha.
I think it was Hasbro did some real terrible ones, and then they tried, but and then that's when the birth of DC Direct, that was doing straight only to comic book store merchandise, and then they could do obscure characters. So at that point, I was like, this is amazing. Like they're doing like Neil Gaiman's Death, and I'm like, what? There's a toy, and that's what, like, they started out with like super obscure, and then started being, oh wait, we can sell more if we do Batman and Superman. So they got the license for that and did and did exclusively that from then on.
Surprise, surprise.
Actually, I used to, when I was in New York, I would go to the DC offices a lot, and I had a buddy there that worked in the toy department, so I'd always go visit him and like look around his office, like, what are you guys making? And he actually, because he knows my first comic book that I ever read was Batman and the Outsiders, and so I'm a huge Outsiders fan. And I remember one time we were at a bar at a DC Mixer, and I'm like, if you ever do a Geoforce action figure, I'm buying you a beer. And he's like, yo, me a beer. And I was like, oh my God, it's happening. And then I went into the offices, and I actually have a prototype. He gave me a Geoforce prototype, so I still have it back on my shelf back there, which was that was a big day for me.
That's like super rare and super probably not worth anything too at the same time.
Oh yeah, no, they're like I have several things that are like that. Like I have James Jean the painter, right? Did all the covers of Fables, yeah. I have a James Jean original painting upstairs, and it is a painting of me dressed as Batman. So I have found a way to have like an extremely like sought after artist do something extreme that no one else would want in their house whatsoever. It was a housewarming gift he gave me back in college.
That's awesome. That's hilarious. Was that from imagination, or did he take a picture of you?
Yeah, he had a picture from, because we were real good friends like freshman year in college and stuff, and then he started. Everyone recognized his genius, so he went other ways,
Yeah.
and I stayed. But yeah, so he had some reference of me. He did the faces completely photorealistic, and then he gave me this like, hunched over, perfect Batman physique though, and then like this really quick skyline. And he was like, he did it in like 3 hours before an apartment, because I got a new apartment, and it was like my apartment warming gift is what it was. And he's like so embarrassed by it ever since. It's like, yeah, this is something I should make public like often. I should make it like my icon.
That should be your Twitter banner.
I should share it again because it's pretty fun. Like the fact that he did it so quick, and this was probably 1999 or something, somewhere around there, where he just learned how to. Because when James went to college, like I saw his portfolio, it looked like Jim Lee, like literally that level of quality and detail, and yeah, very superhero, and it was fantastic. And I was like, oh my God, it was the first portfolio I ever saw. And I was like, oh no, this is why I'm a writer now, So
right. Well, that's the thing. I guess very few people probably know that you started out at SVA in the illustration department to be a comic book. Yeah.
And I remember James. I literally remember the day he was like, "Oh, I got my first painting class." He's like, "I hate painting," and I still think that's so funny. And we're all like, the buddies at the time were all like, "Yeah, no, you're gonna love it. You'll be great at it." By the end of college, he was selling his homework to pay for his tuition. It was like, like he was just like, and now he's painted walls on the Prada store, and like there's like I think 2 buildings in I think it's Portland or Seattle. There's 2 James Jean buildings. Because they both have huge murals. People just call them the James Jean building. It's like, I think he
James Jean 1 and 2.
Yeah, it's one of those things. Oh, that's great.
You're like, I clearly didn't work hard enough in these last 4 years.
Yeah. Well, then you look at also I was in student government, and I was the president of the student government, and my vice president is now the most successful cartoonist of our generation, which was Raina Telgemeier. So it's like, it was just, like, she's like, oh yeah, I've sold 8 million comics so far.
Mm-hmm. Matt, you're a star maker. You're a star maker. You're the Zelig. You're the Zelig of modern comics.
I'm the muse. I just keep, I sit around and say charming things and inspire people.
I got to work harder is all they think about.
Like, oh my God, what if I end up like that guy? This is my only way out. Yeah, it's funny that you can see people, you saw like, well, I mean, Nate Powell's another guy that was in a lot of my classes, and you can just see, you're like, whoa, this is, like his, because my strength was storytelling, not art,
Right.
and like, or like composition. I was, and I actually really liked brush inking, but like you see some guys that have just like everything already, and you're like, yeah, you can see where they're going for. And I think actually Nate's style was tighter back then, before the March days and stuff. I remember like, I think there's some more Art Adams influence in there a little bit,
Sure.
and like, there was, but you just see the guy, and you see the guys that are, going to be doing something else too, like
oh, totally.
My senior year, I knew I wasn't drawing at that point, and so I took a portfolio class where so I could just I was like, I'm just going to do some cover composition, like do some fun, cool stuff with composition. And I had Carmine Infantino, so I took him again for my portfolio class or whatever. And Carmine was always like, "You're gonna be a great cover man someday. You're gonna be a great cover man." I was like, "I don't think so, but thank you, Carmine."
bless him. He was such a sweetheart.
But yeah, so I think I needed maybe 2 more run-throughs of college to get where to a level I would be comfortable with professionally. Like I was getting better, but at the same, it was like I'd also draw a page and then be like so sick of the story. I'm like, I want to keep telling the story. So I'm like, I should probably just do writing.
That's an observation, but like, where were you in your sort of creative evolution, and what did you do as a result of that?
Well, yeah, but like, so I just kind of like, I think I would start when I started doing writing and stuff more, like, because I'd always been a writer even as a kid. I wrote stuff all the time, like I remember writing a story about a kid who was a ninja and a werewolf when I was like in like third grade, and it was like 100 pages long, like shorthand, that kind of. So like I always want to tell stories, but like I think for me, then I started to just do, like when I was writing scripts, I'd just keep doing thumbnails, to make sure I was doing all the visuals right, and then it would just, it got to be, all right, I just want to write, and then I was starting to really experiment with like story format, and like. And I was really inspired by Will Eisner at that point, even though he was no longer a teacher at SVA. I was seeing some of the cool stuff that he did with like storytelling, and I was trying to, imitate that a bit and kind of, go through all the. I really liked working in superheroes, but I wanted to do something different with, the format and try to. And I think that's the problem. When I first started writing on a lot of those, the all ages books like Justice League Adventures and Batman Strikes, and I kept doing stuff with format which didn't help me like become sellable or marketable. I think I kept trying to do weird pitches, with like twist endings or like different kind of form. Like I was always trying something each time, which I thought that was a good place to do that, but it didn't really lead to me getting a lot of steady work. So that's when I started working in like the book market more.
Well, is that a retrospective kind of a like observation?
Yeah, I think I was just kind of throwing everything, like, well, I mean, I knew I was trying stuff, like, like trying different, like even when I was on Ninja Turtles for a while, we did I was like, okay, I want to do this. Oh, actually, if I first tried it on Batman, Beware the Batman, I was like, I want to do this whole comic like a first-person shooter game, so you only see what Alfred sees the whole comic.
Yeah, sure.
And so you don't see what any other character did. And like you see him looking at his hands, you see him talking, and it's that for 20 pages or 22, whatever it was. And my editor was like, "All right, we don't care about this kid's book," and I was like, "Oh, cool." And I really liked how it turned out. And then, but it didn't get any, fan press or anything. And I saw recently Tom Taylor did the same thing, just to excellent effect in Nightwing, and it was just like, I'm like, yeah. I tried that. Like, no one read my book.
He was probably 42 years old at the time, and you were 24.
No, this was older when I was doing
this last year. I'm sorry.
No, but I did that. It actually was. When was it? Probably like 2000. I don't know, 14ish. Probably like 10 years ago.
Yeah.
But that.
So he ripped you off. I mean, I get it.
Well, I don't think I don't think he was aware of the comic. I don't. There was a 6-issue run on that particular series. We had the honor of being the second shortest Batman ongoing series in history, I believe, or maybe third, because I think the Man Bat comic in the series lasted 2 issues, if that counts. But it was the Cartoon Network really messed up with that particular, because that was based on the TV show Beware the Batman, which was an interesting 3D animated take. They were doing all minor villains, which probably didn't help it, but I love that. But they aired a couple episodes and they're like, okay, our new time slot is 3:30 in the morning, because they were at that point Cartoon Network was killing shows that they didn't own outright, and they were acting like they weren't. But it's like, yeah, you're not gonna. So it was the dawn of DVRs, so people were seeing it a little bit, but it was just buried. And so DC was like, oh, we're gonna cancel the series. And I had fought to get that book for like at least a year. Once I through like 2 different editors, like, hey, can I write this? And then finally, I ended up writing 2 out of the 6 issues.
Wow!
But I was in good company. Like Ivan Cohen's a good friend of mine, and he was writing some issues. And I think Mike W. Barr wrote an issue, so that was pretty cool.
Okay.
I don't know. I think there's something I'm forgetting, but it was a pretty fun little series. And they made 1 trade paperback of it. That was it, because they can't make any more.
The recoup cost. That's what it is. Let's make sure we can scrape that up. Well, I mean, so you love superheroes, but you wanted to do something different. Like, what did that, like, how are you framing that in your head where you're like, I'm like, well, this isn't like an intention thing. Like, I'm going to go out there and try something different in a sense of bravado, or were you inspired by maybe some books that you read growing up that were like, oh, I love how they changed something here, and I want to kind of bring that into my work?
Yeah, I think it was more about like, first off, I didn't want to do the same thing, even though I think that's a misconception too, because I have like encyclopedic knowledge of comics. I literally write encyclopedias, so I feel okay saying that. But like, I think I get pigeonholed as somebody who doesn't like want to do something different with the medium, who just wants to recycle endlessly what he's read, and I feel like I'm more like Mark Waid in the sense where I have a lot of stories to tell, and I also just know everything about the characters. But I'd also argue that the best writers know a lot more about the characters than they let on. Even guys like Alan Moore and Neil Gaiman have really, I mean, they're throwing super obscure characters into their work. They love this stuff. I remember like I was doing an interview once, and the interviewer was like trying to do like a gotcha moment. They're like, oh, you say you're like a comic book fan, but you also how can you be a writer as well if you're just a fan? I'm like, if there's a comic book writer out there that is not a comic book fan, you shouldn't be in this business. You're going to be miserable. First off, you're not going to make any money. It's like, but so I always, I've always been really into the characters, but wanting to do something different with them. And I think to your question, it was guys like Morrison's Animal Man, and all of Neil Gaiman's entire body of work, especially the DC stuff, the Sandman and Black Orchid. And things like that, where I was like, oh yeah, these people are embracing these minor characters. And what I really like about minor characters is that you can know everything about them. Where a character like Spider-Man or Batman, you have to, you kind of want to make sure you're not giving them the same experience that they've had before, so it's kind of like, there's so much, but like with a minor character, you can really have a lot of fun. These days, the problem is you're not guaranteed any time of book life. I mean, imagine doing Animal Man for 90 some issues by the time it was over, but because it switched hands a couple times, but it's like, that doesn't happen these days. You don't, even like some of the, bigger minor hits, like some bigger minor characters aren't going to get more than like 24 issues if you're really lucky.
I mean, I'm sure, listen, each company has their canon, and they will cycle through all the B and C listers they can, because there is a level of like, oh wow, I haven't seen this character in a while, and I'm excited to buy that book. And maybe there's a hit. You never know. I mean, there's a random occurrence that happens.
Yeah, I think they're just less, especially DC these days is very not interested. Well, I don't know about now. They seem to be trying more stuff now, which is neat. There was a Fire and Ice miniseries and things. Tom Taylor has been able to do things out of Human Target, but he's obviously an exception to the rule because he is, so well established, and people they know a
Oh,
Tom Taylor.
Tom
I mean, a
King.
Tom King. Sorry, a Tom
Yeah,
King
yeah,
book is
yeah.
going to have a certain level of quality. Well, same with Tom Taylor. He's going to have a level of quality. You know what I mean? But like, so he can get away with doing these, minor characters. But the books are they're very Batman heavy these days, at DC.
Mm-hmm.
And Marvel is trying some stuff with some minor characters too. You see it here and there, but a lot of them are Spider-Man minor characters, or there's a lot of really fun, interesting. I mean, they have so many to explore, but it's like
Oh, I know.
they know they're just not going to make the sales, and they're like, it's almost hardly worth the effort unless you have a really distinct voice or a message for this particular character. And that's what I liked about Morrison's Animal Man was it started out being just like this dude that was like, I'm like a third tier hero. I know I am, like, oh, there's Metamorpho. He went on Letterman talking, it's like what life would be like on this,
Right.
in this like minor level. And then all of a sudden, then it just becomes like, I'm meeting my creator. I'm like all this, like, it just went crazy. I
Yep.
remember thinking like, wow, you can do a lot with this. Like that's some, and even with some of the more straighter superhero kind of stuff, like Green Arrow, Mike Grell's Green Arrow, it wasn't really straight superhero stuff, but it was like that was taking it somewhere. And then of course Denny O'Neil's Question, which was a huge deal for me, like
Mm-hmm.
like, oh wow, here's a minor character, and he is probably taking the opposite direction that the original creator intended. Like it's, I don't think Ditko and O'Neill could have more different, political views. Yeah,
Sure.
but that was, that was a book that was really it was interesting because he did a lot of the mainstream martial arts stuff, but then there was all this philosophy and
Mm-hmm.
this kind of human questions asked throughout the series, and those kind of growing up in that environment. There's so many things. There were so many good comics in the
Oh,
80s and
I
90s.
totally agree. I think the excuse me. I think the one of the great benefits of that period were the existence of Vertigo and Epic.
Oh yeah,
And I think that there were these, while Epic wasn't putting out straight Marvel character comics, they offered an opportunity for things that were not the mainstream. And Vertigo was this bastion of creativity for, over a decade.
yeah. I was really sad to see that one go. I think everybody in comics was really sad, more than other imprints. It was kind of, but it wasn't what it was at the end. They were still doing some interesting stuff, but it's like it's hard to keep that kind of. I mean, there was a lot of punk rock, in those first, that the first stuff. There was all this, and I was, growing up, middle of nowhere, Ohio. My school was between three like bean fields, and
Mm-hmm.
so like to see like these different people to these different characters, like oh, this person, is I mean, I don't know, there's just like a variety that you don't see, like different counterculture elements that I was
Yeah.
not getting. And it was to me as a little kid, especially. I remember reading Vertigo a little too young, some of it, or I don't even know if it was called Vertigo. At that point, some of the stuff that it was, especially I think Sandman took a little bit before the Vertigo. I should remember. I don't think it. I
Yeah.
think it was officially not Vertigo for a bit, because I can remember when Animal Man adopted it. But then
Yeah.
there were some elements that were a little bit frightening and kind of like, oh, that's strangely, that's darker than I've ever seen in a comic or something. But
Yeah.
it was also like so intelligent. It wasn't just
Mm-hmm.
shock dark, which is what a lot of people, you people like for Dark Knight Returns, people mimicked the qualities they understood. Like if you weren't capable of the
Sure.
level of thought that Frank Miller was, you're mimicking parts of it, what you thought you understand. And then you get things like the Batman versus Superman movie. But
Yeah.
like,
Well, I think Vertigo was a yeah. Vertigo was the natural offshoot of that interiority that was displayed on something like The Watchmen.
yeah,
So you had this whole idea of like, well, we can have writers write stories about characters that have sort of a struggle of an interiority issue versus this
mhm,
externality aspect, which made the writing seem and or be far more complicated than
Oh yeah.
what a regular monthly was offering.
And you had, like, if you look at the pages, there's a lot more captions, but they're saying something for the majority.
Hmm.
Not all of them. There was imitators even in the Vertigo line. There were people that didn't, that just. I mean, you're competing with Morrison and Gaiman. Like, I mean, there's
Yeah.
like you're competing with the best there probably has ever been in the superhero genre. And they're doing something different with still using like the Batman villain Black Spider was appearing in Sandman pages, but he was a drug addict, and they'll even mention his career. I don't think it's Black Spider, but he was
Hmm.
throwing in these insane, and like same with Morrison, he was doing these insane, like this Doom Patrol run. There's some faces in there from the Doom Patrol, but not many, and he's doing something
Right.
different, or they're doing something different. I'm sorry. And so it's kind of one of those things that like it people would mimic it the other way too, and just like, oh, I'm just going to put a lot of a lot of captions, and I'm gonna be
Right.
as good at writing. It's like then you get
Right.
where you're telling and not showing, that sort of thing, where
Yeah.
um, because everybody that was working on these titles, probably, I don't know if every single one, but I think they're all um, grew up comic people. Like they knew the language,
Hmm.
and I think that it's something very interesting that I keep going back to a lot with as publishers now are realizing that comics are a hot commodity, that the number one growing field of publishing is comics, and one for another, graphic novels or whatever you want to call it. But I think that's one thing, that you either grow up comics or you don't. I think it's like a language. I feel like you need to learn it
Yeah.
from early on. Like for like getting back to like Raina Telgemeier does something completely different, but she grew up a comics person. She's not a superhero
Hmm.
comics person, but she grew up, reading daily strips all the time. You could see her for better or for worse in her work. You could see some bone. There's a little bit of all that in there, and it's like she's good at telling the stories, and that's what they want. They want someone to mimic her, but you have to have that love of this
Hmm.
media. You have to know what it does without like. As I remember showing comics to a friend out of college, like just a job I had out of college, a day job, um, and she was like, "So which do I read next?" And to me, it's like she was like, "I have trouble because the word balloons conflict with the picture. I don't know how to look at it at the same time." And I'm like, "Wow, my brain does not do that." Like,
Yeah.
like I automatically, I'm drawn. Well, you should. If it's really good comics, you should be drawn. Your eyes should go exactly where they want you to. But I
Yeah.
remember thinking like, wow, that is a whole other, and she's a big reader, and it's a
Hmm.
whole other world, to see comics that way, So but I feel like that's not a problem with kids. That's why kids comics are the ones that are selling so well, like these graphic novels.
Sure.
We just need better.
I, you know, I like to say that I read all my comics as a kid twice.
Yeah.
I read them without reading the word balloons first. So I looked at the action and I sort of intuited what was happening. And then I would get, eventually whenever I was like, I don't have anything else to do, let me read that comic book again. And then I would go through the whole thing. And I think that was how I learned visual storytelling first. And then, but I think you're right. I think kids don't have a problem with that synthesis between the balloons and the images.
And I would say it's even an advantage for. I mean, it's obviously been proven that kids can learn to read with this kind of visual prompting better. But I think the really interesting advantage is that like you're, especially in small doses, like a web comic or like a comic strip, those 4 panels, you're invested. Like no matter
Hmm.
how bad that first panel is, you're going to the end. And like that was
Right.
me with the newspaper. It's like, oh, it's 2 more panels. I'll read that, and then I'll get to
You're not going to quit.
yeah. And that's one of those things. It's like, and then you get with graphic novels, the same thing with the kid's mind. It's like, oh, it's a page turn. Well, I'll just finish this
Right.
page. Well, that wasn't. Let's let's see what's on the next page. Oh, I got to read these two
Hmm.
pages. And I think it's you get that feeling sometimes with a novel or something, but like, oh, I'll go to the end of the chapter. But it's every page with a comic. It's not like
Right.
I feel like your brain is really like, well, let's just keep continuing. And that's why I think another reason these kids are tearing through these. And both I have an 11-year-old, and she'll be 14 this weekend, and they both started with comics and found a, they enjoyed reading from comics. It's so hard to make a kid realize the potential of, and my second
Hmm.
daughter was a lot slower than the other one to find the magic of it. Um, my
Hmm.
first, my oldest found the book I Am Pusheen, which is just a book about Pusheen the cat, and it's just like it's just silliness. And she probably read it maybe 20 sometimes. And that was the book that she was like, okay, I like reading. This isn't a chore. You're right. I like it.
Hmm.
And then my youngest needed the Ms. Marvel TV show to come out. And
Okay,
once
right.
that's the one, yeah, that's the one that hit her. And then she's like, are the comics good? Because and before she was like, well, the TV is the real version, and then she read the comics, and now she's like, the comics are the real version. The TV show, I like it, but the comics are the real stuff.
That's actually really cool.
Yeah.
I love that.
And that got her started. And now she reads. They both read both things, and people are always like, "Oh, comics are a good stepping stone to books," and I'm like, "Yeah, but only if you like keep going back on that stepping stone." Like, like they're
Right.
like it's such a. Especially my daughters will read like 400, 500-page books, and then they'll read a graphic novel in between, or
Hmm.
oh, I'm getting a little. This book's getting a little slow. This part, I'll go read a comic. And it's like, and it keeps them interested in reading it all the time. So I think I just don't understand the idea of comics being less than. Like if people are like, oh, they're stepping, I'm like, they don't have to be a stepping stone. That can be the destination. You can learn about art and pictures. I mean, art and words.
Somebody took me to the movies. I don't watch television again. I only go to the movies.
Yeah, that's exactly what like, the theory. It's like it's this one thing, and then
No,
we had
it's
even now how popular graphic novels are. My daughter, when she was littler, she tried to request. She was looking at the graphic novels at the school library, and the teacher said, "Oh no, those are for the kids that are slower in reading." And I was like,
hmm.
"What?" And yeah, so I like that was not great, but
Oh,
that
it's wrong on so many levels.
yeah,
It's ugh.
and it's like I'll take my kid to an art gallery. We'll look at art, you know,
Hmm.
but I'm not going to look at it any other way. I'm not going to look at a different kind of art in a comic that could very well be, better than what I'm seeing on this museum wall, or like, especially if you're seeing like pop art, it's
Right.
literally taking it
Totally.
from this, there's plenty of room for both. And there's plenty, I mean, there's so many, just some guys that have fallen in love with this medium that could easily be fine artists, but
Oh,
have
for sure.
like, I love this. This is the thing I want to do. Like for getting back to James Jean, I think he liked comics, but I don't think it was his love to like. I think he was more of like, I want to make a really cool image, and so fine art
Hmm.
was the way for him to go. You know what I mean? After a bit, but there's
Yeah. Aaron Weisenfeld is the same way.
yeah, and I
Yeah.
think that's the thing. Like you have to want to tell a story in this particular medium, and then then you're going to be stuck here. Like it's
Well,
not the best financial decision for most people, I think.
oh,
But I think it's
you're not wrong, man. Like I'm like I guess 3/4 of the way through my latest novel, and heroes going to heroes doesn't help this situation. But now all I can think about is like I can't wait to write the comic script that I'm going to do in between the drafts of the book. Like I'll give myself some time in between to kind of recharge and get things together. But I'm like, okay, cool. I get to write a comic script in between, which I'm thrilled because they both like, did you ever get that thing at school when they're like, oh yeah, you love drawing, but you need to do painting because it'll make you better at drawing, or you need to do sculpture because it'll make you be better at painting. And these
yeah.
all feed on one another and improve your skill sets. And I think the same thing counts with any kind of writing. If you want to write prose, and if you have a love for comics or movies or whatever, like write those things, figure it out, and try them.
Oh yeah, I think that's one of the reasons like I can stay energized for my because I do jump back. Like right now I'm writing a 114-page graphic novel for all ages, and I'm writing. I never say kids because
Hmm.
like I would enjoy all the stuff I write. Like I don't think I ever
Yeah.
write just for kids. I think if kids know when you're writing just for kids, but anyway, that's different. but and I'm doing a one of these big guidebooks, Superman guidebook.
Hmm.
For DK Publishing, and then I'm doing another small guidebook. So I'm doing all these things, and then at the same time, I'm getting art for this comic strip, and all week that I'm not allowed to talk about yet, but it's killing me. You know about it,
I do.
but it's that's been the most refreshing thing, because I'm like, oh, this is, this is it's a dream project. So it's like one of those things where it's like, it's and like getting me excited about just doing the other stuff. I'm like, oh yeah, I really like doing these books too. It's like,
Yeah.
but I have to, if I keep, trying all different, it makes every day a little bit more, refreshing. Like, okay, today I'm going to geek out about Superman, and tomorrow I'm going to, dive into character development on this graphic novel, and then all the while I'm going to be proofreading. Like, I'm getting art in for 3 different comic projects right now, and it's so much fun, like, to see.
Oh,
And
wow.
they couldn't be more different, and it's like so much fun to see all of them. It's like, as a writer, that's always the best part for me, is like, all right, sometimes it's like, how close did they get to my script, or like what cool things did they do with my script? It can be a little, depending on which one, or how worried I am about it. Like,
Right.
certain projects, I'm like way more like, okay, I left this particularly open because I want the artist to do something cool, But then some, I'm just like, oh, I really want this the way I have it in my head. I hope it matches. It's like, I wish I could lose that ego completely. Like, but I think it's more about like, I go over my scripts a lot, and I'm like, I really want this sequence to look like this. I think it would be really cool, And then sometimes it's seeing the art that doesn't match. That's like, oh, I like, that's a bummer, because they did something, And although sometimes it works out better, but then sometimes you have guys that will do panels that are just like, I didn't feel like drawing that. Like, I remember
Right.
one particular. I'm not going to name the artist, but I did it was an all ages comic back in the day for DC, and I could see why they weren't very excited about it, And this one scene, it was tough because it was supposed to take place in like a shopping mall, or like a department store in a shopping mall kind of thing. So there had to be some details, and like there was literally like one rack of like clothes that had like 2 pieces of clothes hanging on it, and that's the whole store. It was like the worst store in the history of time. And I was like, okay, he didn't want to draw that. Like, I probably should have said it somewhere different, But
Yeah.
especially for that level of book, I had a fun
I
sequence
wonder
planned.
if, yeah, I wonder if, I wonder if, and I don't know if, but since you came at it from a visual point of view originally, the idea of being in this industry, I wonder if that sets up a different sort of thought process and expectation
Yeah,
in the,
I think it
in
does.
receiving final art.
But I think actually
I wonder.
I've had, multiple guys compliment me on, my scripts, because I do come at, like, I've never asked for anything impossible for an artist to draw, which is one of the big benefits of the cartooning degree. Like, I'm never
Yeah.
like, oh, do this and this and this. Like, I did a self-published comic years ago with Raina, back to her again, and she, at one point, she was like, I can't draw this. All the things you're asking for me in this panel, I can't draw. And then I drew it for her on a piece of paper, just like, and she was like, all right. But then that was like the least excited she was about drawing a panel. And so I'm like, I should have just said, do whatever you want, like, I remember, the example I always use is, if you're playing, like, I would play, like, when my wife, my girlfriend at the time, my wife now, we would play pool at a bar. If she ever asked me how she should line a shot up, she missed it. And if she just did her own thing, she was so much better at pool than me. But she would second guess herself and ask me. And so it's like, yeah, if you're with somebody, if you have somebody that's talented, they should be doing the thing that makes them excited, as long as it. I always say, if you have a better idea, go with that. If you're doing something to avoid drawing something, that might not be the best. I mean, if you really like hate horses, we can figure something out. Like,
sure.
And that's why
it could be motorcycles.
Yeah. I like it a lot better when I get an email or a text or something from the artist saying, I'm having trouble with this. Can I do it this way? And it's almost always like, yeah, unless it was like, oh no, we need to have this particular plot point. Like,
right. If there's a setup necessary, you have to. Right. Yeah, I get it.
Yeah, the guy I'm working with on the comic strip right now, it could not be going better. Like, because we're just, because there's so much communication. When there's not, it's like such a bummer. Like, I know, like, when Wes Craig and I started working on Batman Strikes back in the day, like, the first one we didn't really talk, and then after that we became really good friends, and so it was more of a conversation, of like, hey, can I do this sequence this way? I remember there's one issue where he's like, and I was like, oh, all right, that, I really like that little moment to moment. Like I was definitely doing some sort of riff on like a Keith Giffen, Mark Damatis kind of, like moment to moment, like they did in Justice League all
Yeah.
the time, which was a huge influence too. And he was like, he didn't really seem to get what I was going for. And so he did it his own way. And then the editor was like, no, you got to do it back. I was like, oh, I'm sorry. Because I said, yeah, do it your way. But I was like, he knew that I was like, I liked the way the script was for that particular scene, and then he had to go back and change it anyway.
Wow.
But
well,
it wasn't my fault.
I mean, I guess your instinct was right.
but what the thing is, Wes is also a fantastic storyteller. But Wes and I have very different approaches to comic stories. But I think that's why we worked together so well over the years. We haven't done it in a while. We need to do it again. But once he's done being a superstar, I'll recruit him again.
Yeah. I mean, he'll get you back. Yeah. He'll return a phone call, I'm sure.
With John Samariva on Batman Turtles, when we did that, at the first it was like we were, talking a little bit, but by the end we were just doing Twitter direct messages all the time, and it just made it so much stronger. Like because we started getting to feel what the other person was excited to. Like when I know what an artist is excited to draw, I'm like, yeah. To me, it's a prompt. It's not like a hindrance. It's like, oh, how can I put that in? Like when we were doing Avengers, the Marvel Action Avengers for the IDW Marvel thing, John was like, I love drawing the Hulk. And I was like, I'd already turned in the first like 6 or 5, or I had the first 6 issues approved plot wise, and the Hulk was not in them. And so I'm like, all right, hold on. And so from then on, I was brainstorming. So I had 2 real cool Hulk ideas. One happened, but by that point, John was doing Neverlanders with Tom Taylor. He was only doing our covers.
Tom Taylor seems to be circling the drain of this conversation.
Yeah, he keeps like, oh, I'm gonna get that guy now. Yeah, maybe maybe I did something to Tom Taylor.
Dude, I'm just saying. It seems to be, I
mean, he does seem too nice when I meet him in person. Like he's up to something. He's got. Nobody can be that nice and that successful.
It's impossible. It's actually been proven to be the fact.
Yeah.
You have 3 comic projects coming in on the art side. You're working on other things, and you've got the guidebooks. Like that's a lot of things to be shifting gears on. How do you break that down for your day?
Well, like I'm not one. I know a lot of guys will work on several different projects a day, but for me, it really just I like besides looking at the art and like giving notes if I have to on any kind of art that's coming in, because I try to do that as fast as possible because that's their schedule. I don't want to mess up somebody else's schedule. But like otherwise, I'll just try to stay on one project. Like yesterday was all Superman book. I wasn't doing much else. And then because if I bounce around too much, I start losing, especially like the fiction or character stuff, because then I get out of a character and that's awful. So I try to just like this day is for this, and then tomorrow is something else. Or like if I can knock a whole project out and then start the next one before the other ones do, that's always even more advantageous for me because I can check it off and I don't get overwhelmed. But it just kind of depends because like right now I'm doing several things because I had a slow couple of months, and so I'm like, well, I should have been doing those and during those months, but the timing didn't work out. And as long as I can turn stuff in and meet deadlines, I don't feel like because if I'm not busy, then I'm just like, although I do have some creator owned, I want to get a pitch done for an artist by October, and then I have and I'm writing that an Asheville graphic novel. We've talked about that.
That's right. The
history of Asheville through the History Press, and I've written 2/3 of it, but that's one that's like I have to do between other jobs, it's which has been working out well because that's another thing that I'm getting pages back to. So I guess I'm getting 4 artist pages every once in a while. And they're all so good.
Listen,
nice.
The longer you wait on that Asheville project, the more history
I know
you can put into it.
I'm getting in trouble because but it does really. What's interesting about our town is that like after the stock market crashed, like nothing changes for the longest time. So the history kind of stops for a while, and that's why we have all these cool old buildings because the city literally was bankrupt. It couldn't afford to like do new buildings. And then when they did, by the time they started like, oh, we're going to put a mall downtown, which is something they were wanted to do in the 80s. And then everyone
Yeah.
here was like, no, like, so that doesn't change, which is nice. But
Yeah, that's
so yeah,
funny.
it can't change too much, hopefully.
Yeah, right. Well, I mean, listen, maybe one exciting thing could happen maybe somewhere around August, and then you
Yeah,
can put that near the end.
like I like how our local news is like a bear walked into the movie theater. That's like the big, that's our
Yeah,
biggest news for the month. But yeah, it's
I'm
kind of
fine with that.
yeah,
I'm okay
coming
with
from New
that.
York, that's all right.
Totally. Yeah, we went up to New York a couple weeks ago and got to go to the Whitney Biennial, which was always an interesting thing to do because it feels like you're like they've stirred together like some really amazing artists with a bunch of people like finishing their MFA, program. And you're like, like what's this? What's not working here? But I love going to that stuff because it makes me think. I mean, I'm always taking pictures and notes when I go to that kind of stuff because it's so out of the box of what I'm doing on a
Yeah,
daily basis.
I think that's one thing I need to. I do miss museums in New York going a lot. I have
Hmm.
taught my daughters the art of if you don't like a piece at the museum, you don't have to stand there the same amount of time with the piece you like. Like, I think that's something that a lot of people be like, okay, like these are spoons on a plate on the wall. What do I think about this? And they, will look at it for the same time as something that really interests them. It's like I beeline to what I like, and will
Yeah.
stay there for a long time. Like at the Met, I always liked the uh, what was they had a lot of Manet paintings.
Hmm.
I really like him as far as as far as the old school master of fine arts kind of thing. And so I would just they had this really cool chalk drawing that I'd look at like all the time, and then I'm like walking by other stuff that just doesn't, But I think it's interesting to take it all other stuff, but then also realize, yeah, I don't owe this artwork anything. Like
No,
you could use your TikTok the same degree of like swiping, to some.
but the funny thing is like some of those paintings that I cruise by, for decades, sometimes I'll stop and I go, oh, and then I'll notice something that
Yeah,
I didn't notice before, and I'll kind of like get into it. And I don't know whether it's as a result of books I'm reading that my mind is sort of open to whatever that might be subject wise.
yeah. That's one thing I did with in the same kind of vein. I used to watch all the movies that were nominated for like the Academy Awards every year,
Sure. Yeah, yeah, of
and
course.
also the movies I enjoy too. But I go see everyone in the theater every time, and I haven't ever since kids. I haven't done that anymore, and I do miss it because there are these movies that I wouldn't give the time of day normally,
Hmm.
and I still will watch it and be like, all right, but I can find something in there that I like, like because a lot of times the Academy Awards they latch on to things that they think it's great. Like this is
Yeah.
great acting. This person's screaming a lot. Like, is it like? Like maybe if they weren't screaming, it would be more powerful, But
Yeah. But
but
there are more pictures. Like, don't
oh yeah, now
isn't
there's
like the
like
final it's like
10.
seven, right? It's like it used to be like what, three
I
or
think it was
five, and now
5,
it's seven.
and then
Yeah.
I think it can go up to 10. I think it can vary.
Oh my
It's
God.
weird. And I remember like at the point, okay, ticket prices at the movies like when we're still living
Right.
in
It's a
New
little
York.
pricey.
I've
Yeah.
got this 1 year old, or back then, or so I'm like, we can't really go together. Do I want? The only thing I do miss is I looked exactly like my closest friend. Our IDs looked enough alike that he worked at the Brooklyn Academy. What was it? The BAM. When they had
Hmm.
um, what is it? Brooklyn Arts. I don't remember what it is, but they would show all sorts of like um, normally like more independent movies and things. And he was like, "Oh yeah." He worked there, and he's like, "What? They didn't take my old pass. I haven't." So I took his old pass, and I was able just to go and see all these movies, which was great. And they looked at me like, "Yeah, this is definitely you." I was like, but I remember seeing a lot.
Even though I worked with you and you don't look like the guy I worked
Yeah,
with, go on in.
sure. But I'd be in the theater, and I always like there'd be like one other guy in there, and I'm like, all right, I don't feel so bad,
Yeah.
I'm a broke poor artist in New York, and they're gonna show this anyway because there's this guy. He's there. He's watching it. But yeah,
Yeah, that's a good question. If
yeah.
if
Do they
if
even
nobody's in
push
the theater,
play?
do they hit start? I don't know. I have no idea. So ideation. So I mean, you were talking about you want to do a pitch for this fall.
Hmm.
So, and I'm guessing you've talked to this artist, and as I like to, my new favorite word is swindle. You've swindled them into saying, "Yes, I'm interested in doing something with you."
Yeah.
Um,
Well, I've missed a couple opportunities because I feel like I have, because maybe it's the art background or whatever. I feel like I can spot the guys that are going to be big name guys, like ahead,
mhm.
even right before they're about to break in. I remember, like uh, what was it, Chris Somney, when I first saw his stuff, and I was just like, and I remember like, oh, he's so good. I should, and I was talking to him, and he's like, oh, I just got this major job. And it's like, okay,
Right.
never mind. And I remember like Sean Murphy. I was like, you're gonna be. I saw he did a Batman special, and then no one was really paying attention to. And I was like, you're gonna be one of the biggest artists in comics. And he was like, I said that to him, and he was like, oh man, thanks. That makes me feel. He's like, because I think it was a low point at that point. Like, he did this thing.
Sure.
He deserved to get attention for. He didn't get attention for it. And
Yeah.
so, but then by then he was already doing. He was like, "Yeah, I'm going to do something with Grant Morrison." I'm like, "All right, you win." Grant wins every time. But it would be like, because that was when at that point I had sold my this creator-owned series that's coming out. Hopefully this fall, we'll see. That I'm not officially allowed to talk about yet, but it had
Fingers
been
crossed.
sold to DC and Wildstorm, and we were looking for an artist. And so these were two of the artists that we approached, and they just got hit big. And so I saw there's this another artist right now that I'm really liking, and I've been seeing his work online, and we've been chatting, and I'm just like, hey, if you wanted, he's like, I'm booked till October, and I'm like, I'll have a pitch for you on October, before October. If you want to do any samples, we can try to, because he liked this. I'm doing it. It's a very weird story. This is again probably not a the best decision for me because but it's something it's a story I'm really excited about and passionate about. It's kind of a different spin on something. And then we want to maybe approach Image with it, or if we
Okay.
can find a home for it. Where I want someone on that. Like right now, the book that I'm doing is with Storm King, which is the John Carpenter's comic company, and our editor could not be more supportive and more excited about it. And that is when you have an editor that's on your team that's like, yeah, let's do this the right way. It's really it's very different experience than some of my past work. So if we can find somebody like that for this particular book, and it's one of those things where when the idea comes, you just start writing it down, no matter what else you're working on.
Hmm.
Like I have
No,
this,
I hear
yeah,
you.
that.
Yeah.
Like just this week, I'm supposed to be working on some of these other projects, and I've been working on. I have a 12-issue Batman series that I've been working on for years and years in my head. Someday, hopefully, I'll get to tell it. Who knows? Or maybe it'll be changed to like the like guy that wears black story. Like some sort of imitation
Hmm.
Batman character. But
Sure.
either way, it's something. And I just had the big twist hit me this week, and I'm like writing it, and I came up, and I was excitedly telling my wife all about it. She's like, "What is this for? Which job is this for?" I'm like, "Oh, I don't have this job. Like, this is something I'm really excited about right now. Today's job is this." And so it's like, because if I don't get that down, then and which is nice because then I have this, like, I have a huge document with lots of different other people's characters, and
Hmm.
like, and I've forgotten half of them. I'll read through. I'm like, "Oh, that is a good one." So if I ever get that, I
Yeah.
have
Yeah.
something to go. And so this um, one of the projects that I'm not allowed to talk about, I'm using one of these ideas that I'm like, oh, good. I had a really cool idea already, like probably 2 or 3 years ago, that I'm still just as excited about now. I've had some where I'm like, oh, I'm
Right.
not excited about that idea anymore. That's terrible. But, so that made it easier because I was on a deadline crunch when I was writing it, and I was like, oh, I already have an idea. That's the hard part.
So for you, what's the like? So whatever. Last week of September. Like, what do you have in your head that you're going to put together for the artist?
Well, for that, like I've a lot of times when, especially if it's a personal project, I already pace it
Hmm.
out like kind of page by page. And so this is around an 80 to 100 page project. And
Okay.
so I've already paced out about 60 of it. There's some problems, so I need to go back in and cause the ending's not working I have the ending, but the climax isn't working as smoothly as I want it to. So I need to go back in
Hmm.
and see why, like what at the beginning is not set up to pay off the ending. So I have that done. For this particular thing, I'll probably just write out like 5 to 7 pages of the script, spend some time doing that, and then write out a full pitch for the company that we're going to pitch. So the artist can see where we're going to start and end. I've kind of given them some paragraphs here and there,
Mm-hmm.
and then just to make sure, because I have a lot of, this is what I'm passionate about today. But when I look at something that I was passionate about last month, I'm still passionate about it. I still get back into,
Yeah.
I can get that hat back on really easily and be like,
It
oh,
doesn't take much.
Yeah.
No, I can go through that morgue I have in my hard drive, and I go, oh, wait, and then next thing you know, you're like going like this and that and this and that, and then you're like, stop it, just stop. That's not what you're working on.
That's the problem. Like, and even when I'm working, no matter what I'm working on, even if I can love it more than anything, I'm still like in the back of my head, like, oh, I just figured out something for your other. Like I just listened to Stephen King's Misery. And
okay,
there's a bit in it with I've seen the movie, I've never read the book or whatever, but that was my travel book, I was listening to in the car going back and forth getting the daughters to school, and he was going on a bit about how his subconscious just works on stuff, or the main characters does, but the main character's Stephen King. Like he's a writer that is kidnapped by his number one fan kind of thing, and but he's talking about how his subconscious works on things, and then finally it's ready to tell him something. And it'll just it hits you when it wants to hit you, kind of thing. And I'm like, yeah, that's 1,000% true. Like if it's
totally.
And sometimes you don't have the luxury of waiting till this idea is ready. Sometimes you're just like, I gotta wing it and hope it works out because this deadline is now, and like this is a paid job, like, and I'm hopefully like right now, the 114 page graphic novel still has some rough spots. That because I haven't started the scripting, and I'm going over with the editor back and forth, notes and stuff, and I'm just 100% confident that it's going to come out on the page the way I want it to. Like those rough spots all get worked out because the whole time I'm writing, I'm thinking about the theme, I'm thinking about the character development, and I'm not in the characters' heads yet. I'm still like, oh, if this happens, we're getting the plot structure down, and that sort of thing. But it's like those kind of things I'm not so hooked on, I'm like, oh, and the ending will come out because the beginning's already, like, my mind already knows what the ending is, like, because he was like, well, what are we going to do with this last bit of dialogue? Because I said kind of some of the closing words, and it was like just a placeholder because it's not right, it's not right. It doesn't make. And he was like, he noticed it wasn't right, so he called it out on the outline and said,
you heard the wrench fall on the concrete floor.
Yeah, like, this doesn't seem to work for me. I'm like, yeah, but like I'm not going to know that until literally the day I'm scripting it, and because sometimes things are hidden in the beginning. And like I did this this book, it was a novel that I wrote, never published it anywhere, but I taught myself how to do a novel from writing this, and there was a part where someone dies in a bathroom, and in the beginning of the book, without even thinking about it, one of the characters like, oh, I love this bathroom, it's so yellow and bright. I really wanted the bathroom to be bright because awful things happen in bathrooms. And when I wrote that line, I didn't even think, oh, that's foreshadowing, but it was accidental foreshadowing because I wasn't consciously thinking, murders happen. I'm thinking the other awful things that happen in bathrooms.
Sure.
And so like that kind of stuff just comes out, I feel like.
Yeah, I mean, back to King. I think what King says, because he writes about that in his book on writing.
Oh.
And
yeah, I've read that. Yeah.
Titled On Writing.
Yeah.
He talks about how that subconscious, allowing it to do its thing. And I think if you give yourself that permission to let that happen versus you hope it happens, like I think if you just and I think if you load the hopper up with enough of the story and the characters, the connections that and listen, it's all about making these connections, right? Like that's the whole thing of writing, is like if you can connect this to that, people go, my God, you're brilliant. It's but we have the luxury of time on our side to make ourselves look brilliant. And but you load that hopper up, and I think ultimately when you get to that moment, like you were saying, I mean, the characters are going to say what they're going to say.
Yeah, and that's 100% true. Yeah.
Yeah, you can't predict it now what they're going to say then because you're not there yet.
And it's funny because you're like, oh, that guy's funny. I was when I started out with the the creator own thing that I'm going to be doing in October, trying to pitch then, I started out
Mhm.
writing the outline and I was like, oh, this character's going to be a jerk. He's going to be kind of like this, arrogant prick. And then he just became so funny and likable.
Hmm.
And I'm like, okay, he's not going to be that at all. He's going to be like, he's going to be our humorous relief that's saying stuff that other people can't say, in a
Yeah.
serious scene or something, but he's going to be, he's going to be arrogant still and, and jerky, but you're going to like him, which I didn't expect at all. I thought everybody that read it would be like, this guy's the worst. I'm like, no, I think he's going to be fun. I'm starting to really like him. I kind of like him more than the main guy a little bit in certain circumstances. So
That's great that you can be open to that, because I think that's what makes the difference between being happy with what you write and then fighting against what's coming out of you. So
and there's
nice.
I think that just kind of is one of the, and I have the same kind of issue with editors when editors suggest things, and because I'm so set in my ways, I have my thing, I'm ready, and then an editor will suggest thing, and it takes. I always talk about a day of mourning, because I take a day of mourning the comic that I was going to make. It's not going to be there, and then I come back to it, and I'm like, yeah, that was a better idea. He had a better idea than me. The ego's, gets checked at that point. Like, what's better for the comic? But then sometimes it's like, no, that idea is way worse. What else can I do to make them happy that I can keep this idea, because this needs to be in the story, And there's a few times where I've backed away from point because the editor was like, it was maybe my first time working with them, or they were so experienced and I was so inexperienced, and sometimes I was like, I should have. Here's a good example. This is literally my first Marvel comic I'd ever written. And it was a Spider-Man story, and the whole concept was Spider-Man webs up a guy, and it was like bad guy, and then he's like, don't worry, the webs last an hour, they'll get you down before then. You're like up high at the outside of the building, because Spider-Man's being jerky that day, I guess, and there's an explosion. He's like, okay, I gotta go stop this, I'll be back, or someone, and then so he goes off, and then it's 30 minutes later, and the whole plot, it's like an 8-page story. And the plot of the guy is hanging upside down, like, oh my God, I can feel the web getting weaker, and it's all from his perspective. He's trying to signal like the housekeeping people inside the building to try to get him, to save him and this sort of thing. And so the whole thing is his point of view. And then the end, I'm spoiling this very old story, like 2001 story. Sorry, everybody, all Spider-Man Unlimited fans. But the web breaks and Spidey catches him at the last moment. It's a little, he's like, oh, sorry. And then he webs him up again at the end,
right?
And he's like, don't worry this time. He's like, definitely I'm calling somebody, that sort of thing. And the gag is Spider-Man walks away and the guy's like a foot off the ground at the end. That's the little twist ending. And I had Spider-Man walking off the way, and my editor said, when Spider-Man walks, it looks awkward. We should have him swinging away. And I'm thinking, yeah, but the storytelling is the main thing. Like, he's right. Spider-Man does look a little awkward walking, But in this particular case, the gag relies on Spider-Man being that close to the ground. The more you can put on that ground, the better the joke was. And so then when the artist drew it, great artist and did a great job. But the guy's still because Spider-Man's swinging away to get the angle right, he put Spider-Man, like the guy's still hanging about like maybe 6 feet off the ground. And it makes the gag not, like I remember one of my buddies was like, yeah, he's still going to hurt himself. The gag doesn't work if he's not right over the ground. It's not as strong. It works, but it's not as strong. And then I remember just like all of me going like, I need to fight back on this. I need to fight back. And I'm like, no, it's not important. My first gig, I don't think I've gotten any more jobs from that editor anyway. So I probably could have said something, but
it was a test. It was a test, Matthew.
Yeah, I failed. Yeah.
So, okay. You got big guide for DK, Superman thing, and then the smaller one you're working on, then the fielding artwork coming in.
Yeah. Well, yeah, one of them, I mean, I think I can say the companies, like I'm doing, I don't know, because I'm doing my first graphic novel for First Second is one of the projects that I'm really excited about. And then the other one is for John Carpenter's Storm King, is the creator-owned book that was supposed to be at New York Comic Con, but it sounds like we're going to be missing that by a few months. So I'm going to be talking about all that. And I'm also when that comes out, I will finally start a newsletter because I'm terrible at social media and terrible about telling. And I would like to do a newsletter that could tell a little bit about what I'm working on, maybe what art I'm liking at the moment, like something positive. You don't get too much of that
Mm-hmm.
anyway. And then I thought it might be fun to spotlight something from this ridiculous collection that I have, like every
I think that
month.
would be great.
Yeah, to show like, look at this nonsense thing that I own. Like this is a piggy bank in the shape of Batman. But
There are people who love Batman. They love collecting stuff, and you have things that most everyone doesn't have. So that's kind of a, so it's a win-win.
just some weird stuff. Like one of my favorite things, my friend points it out every time he comes. It's a pair of, it's from the 70s, I believe, or late 60s. And it's in the package because it's just a pair of metal scissors, and it says Robin and Batman, which is weird first off because Robin's getting top billing. But then if you took it out of the package, there's nothing on it. It's just a pair of like, like regular
Chrome
metal
scissors.
scissors. It's like, how is this a product? But yeah,
Wow.
I like really odd stuff. And my wife likes to buy me the weirdest, like anything Batman that she can find that is just the weirdest possible product. Like, although this one actually from my parents, I'm the proud owner of a Batman toaster that when you put the toast in, it makes the bat symbol on the side of the toast, which is neat. And then the worst part is my mom bought me this for Christmas. And then in Facebook, she was like, happy birthday to the only guy I know who owns a Batman toaster. And I'm like, you bought me the toaster you're mocking me for. Like, I don't need a Batman toaster in my house. But it's here. It's in this
That's
office.
brilliant. That's a brilliant burn. You know what I mean? Like she's setting you up for future jokes. It's perfect. I love it.
She's just gonna keep buying me garbage and mocking me for owning it,
and then mock you for it. I think you get a golf clap for that for sure. Well, my friend, the time has come.
Yeah. Well, thanks for having me.
Yeah, well, it was great to finally have some stories. You are one of the great storytellers, man. I always have a great time talking with you.
Or at least talk a lot, whether it's good or not. We'll
yeah, sure.
We'll see
well, listen, I'll tighten it up to clean 15 minutes. It'll be beautiful. Well, good luck on the on getting these projects done, because I'm sure there are more going to be slamming down your email soon enough. And get that freaking newsletter going.
Yes,
do it.
I have to.
It's free. You can do it on Substack for free. It's easy.
That's the thing. I think once my August deadlines are hit, it's time to do something.
Great. Another distraction. Perfect. I'm sorry. I apologize.
That's my whole life. Once my kids are in college, I'll start doing other things.
Right on, man. Right on. And I guess I'll put whatever social media that you're not paying attention to on the show notes. And so maybe if you say, hey, I'll be at this upcoming show, people can find you there and get their Batman stuff signed. Awesome. Well, thanks, buddy.
Yeah, thanks again.